The hum of the old gas pump was the only sound cutting through the Nevada dusk. Michael stood still beside his black pickup, the nozzle steady in his hand, the dial ticking slowly. A breeze rolled through Dust Creek. Not a town, not even a proper dot on a map, just a lonely junction with a half-lit sign that read, "Gas and Go." The O blinked like it wasn't sure if it should still be trying. He wore gray sweats and a faded hoodie, the kind of clothes meant to disappear in. Nothing about him said celebrity or champion. His hands, thick and scarred, rested loosely at his sides. He didn't check his phone, didn't make a sound, just watched the sun dip behind a craggy ridge in the distance. Inside the station, the clerk, a gangly teenage boy with too much forehead and not enough nerve, sat behind smudged glass, half watching a muted game show on the TV above the fridge. He barely looked up when Michael entered 10 minutes earlier, only muttered, "Restroom keys on the chain," and pointed to a rusty hubcap hanging near the door. Michael hadn't said much in return. He didn't talk unless he needed to. People heard his voice and thought of YouTube clips, old interviews, or that cartoonish lisp the media never let him live down. But the real him was quieter. Still, heavy with years. He filled the tank, eyes drifting across the cracked lot. A tumbleweed bumped against the curb like a drunk old man. No one else in sight. Not yet. Then he heard it. An engine. Big, guttural, coming fast. Headlights flared as a lifted pickup screeched into the lot. Loud music. Laughter. And 5 white boys pouring out like they owned the heat, the asphalt, the night. Michael's eyes flicked once toward them in the mirror, then back to the pump. He didn't need more than a glance. They were drunk, or worse. Cowboy boots, cut-off sleeves, one of them carrying a beer like it was a trophy. He could smell the arrogance from 20 feet away, the kind of young men who never learned to fear the world because it always feared them first. He replaced the nozzle with a soft click, tapped the side of the truck twice, a habit from another life, and waited, not scared, not even tense, just waiting, because he already knew this wasn't going to end the way they thought. The first voice came slurring across the lot like spit sliding off a sneer. Well, what do we got here?" Michael didn't flinch, just eased his gas cap into place and closed it with a soft click. He turned, eyes half-lidded, and watched the gang fan out like dogs off leash. They were laughing, but it wasn't joy. It was the kind of laughter men used when they were about to do something stupid and wanted to feel strong doing it. Mason led, tall, sunburned, with a jaw made for chewing sunflower seeds and opinions. He walked like someone who never thought he'd be outnumbered in his own county. "Evenin', Pops," he called. "You from round here?" Michael said nothing, just walked toward the driver's side of his truck. "Hey, I asked you something," Mason said, stepping in front of the door before Michael could reach it. Behind him, Bo, a square wall of muscle and beer gut, cracked his knuckles like he thought someone might be impressed. Ricky and Chad hung back near the hood of their truck, sipping beers and jeering just loud enough to be part of the show. Kyle, the youngest, hovered on the edge, not laughing, not smiling, just watching, always watching. Michael looked Mason in the eyes. Calm, unbothered. "You're standing where I need to be." Mason barked a laugh. "You hear that? He wants his door, like he's got somewhere to be." Michael's voice didn't change. "I do. That was all." For words, flat and cool, like a stone skipping once across still water. Mason leaned in closer. "Man like you, out here all alone?" His tone turned. "Kinda brave, don't you think?" Bo let out a low chuckle. "Or stupid?" Michael's eyes didn't leave Mason's. "I'm giving you a chance to walk away." Mason blinked, just once, as if he hadn't expected that. The others laughed louder, but Kyle's glance flicked to Michael's hands, then to the scar under his left eye. Something in him shifted. Subtle, like the first sign of weather changing. From inside the station, the clerk stood up slowly. He pressed his fingers to the glass, but didn't open the door. Didn't call the cops. Just watched. "You threatening us, old man?" Bo asked, stepping in too close. "No," Michael said softly. "I'm warning you." The quiet around them thickened. The wind had stopped. Even the desert seemed to be holding its breath. Then Ricky spat near Michael's boots. "You one of those types," he muttered. "Think just 'cause folks are too polite to put you in your place, you get to act like you run the world." Michael turned his head, not in anger, but with the stillness of a man deciding how much he was willing to lose. "I don't run the world," he said, "but I know what happens when people forget how small they are." His words were calm. No drama. No fire. But Bo stepped forward anyway. He was smiling. He didn't see the shift in Michael's stance. Didn't hear the clock start ticking. Didn't know the storm had already begun. Bo's shoulders squared like he was still in high school, about to body a freshman in the hallway for looking too confident. "You got a real mouth on you, old man," he said, closing the space between them. Michael didn't move. Didn't raise a hand. Just looked at him with the kind of stillness that made noise feel cheap. "You ever been hit?" Michael asked softly. Bo blinked. "What?" "I mean really hit. Not drunk bar fight hit. Not big man on the lake hit. I mean by someone who knew exactly where to put it. You ever felt that?" Bo scoffed, but his feet hesitated. Mason stepped in again, smirking. "He's trying to scare us with words now." Cute. Inside the gas station, the clerk shifted nervously behind the counter. He reached under it, maybe for a phone, maybe for courage. But the line had already been crossed. Bo stepped forward and shoved Michael. It was messy. Wide stance. Off balance. Full of beer and bluff. Michael absorbed it like stone absorbs rain. His boots didn't move an inch. His body barely rocked. Bo blinked, confused. "You done?" Michael asked, low and almost gentle. Bo snarled and cocked his arm back. And that was the moment. The moment the world shifted. Michael's left hand moved first, a parry, fluid, redirecting the punch before it could form. His right hand followed, palm open, then fist, then a short, sharp arc across Bo's cheek. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Bo's legs gave before his pride could catch up. He dropped hard, knees hitting asphalt like bricks off a roof. The laughter stopped. Ricky stepped forward, cursing, reaching for something under his flannel, a gesture more than a weapon. Michael stepped into him. A quick step, pivot, elbow to the ribs. Not enough to break, just enough to empty the air from his lungs. Ricky dropped beside Bo, coughing wetly, eyes wide with disbelief. Mason stood frozen. "Who the hell are you?" he muttered, his voice suddenly small. Michael looked at him for the first time, really looked. "I'm the man who told you to walk away." Mason lunged. It was sloppy, desperate. A grab at Michael's hoodie. Michael dipped under it, stepped behind, grabbed the back of Mason's neck and pressed, just enough to put him on one knee. "I gave you a choice," Michael whispered. Chad turned to run. Kyle didn't move. He just stood there, phone forgotten in his hand, fingers trembling. The desert wind kicked up again, scattering grit across the lot. A buzz of fluorescent light overhead flickered. Michael released Mason and stepped back. 3 men were groaning on the ground. One had fled. One remained. Kyle. Eyes wide. Breathing shallow. Michael walked past him slowly. Not looking to scare him. Just done. When he reached the truck, he paused. Looked back once. "You still got time," he said quietly. Kyle didn't speak. But his phone slowly lowered. And for the first time since they arrived, his eyes said, "I understand." The gas station lot was hushed now, like the ground itself had exhaled. Michael stood beside his truck, the door still shut, the key still in his pocket. His chest rose and fell evenly. No strain, no heat in his voice. Just presence. Mason was on his knees, eyes wide, nostrils flaring like a dog freshly leashed. His pride had been wounded in front of his pack, and there was nothing more dangerous than a man with bruised ego and an audience. "Old man," Mason spat, staggering to his feet, wiping blood from his mouth. "You think you can just walk away from this?" Michael didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence did more than words. Bo groaned somewhere behind them, trying to sit up. Ricky was clutching his ribs, breath wheezing. Chad was long gone, a coward's instinct doing what brains and spine couldn't. Kyle still stood there, frozen, his phone in one hand, disbelief in the other. Mason reached behind his back, not for a gun, but for a tire iron from the bed of their truck. The sound of it scraping metal sliced through the desert air. Michael tilted his head. Not afraid. Just disappointed. You sure you want to do that? He asked quietly. You don't tell me what I want. Mason roared. The tire iron clanged once against the pavement as he adjusted his grip. Michael didn't move. Mason charged. What happened next didn't look real. Not to Kyle, not to the clerk watching from inside, and certainly not to the world once it made its way online. Michael sidestepped, his body rotating in a tight, controlled arc. His arm caught Mason's swing mid-motion, redirected the force with a flick of his wrist, and then, in one fluid movement, drove his elbow into Mason's sternum. Not hard enough to break. Just hard enough to collapse his fight. Mason gasped, dropped the tire iron, and crumpled forward. Michael caught him, held him there for a second, and whispered something nobody could hear. Then he let go. Mason fell to the ground, coughing, eyes wet. Michael stepped back and looked at Kyle. You recording? Kyle nodded once. Guilty. Good, Michael said. People should see. Kyle blinked. Who are you? Michael turned, opened his truck door, and climbed in. No one special, he said. Just not blind. The door shut with a soft thunk. The engine turned over like a quiet promise. Michael didn't peel out. Didn't leave smoke. He just backed up, turned around, and pulled onto the empty highway like nothing had happened. Inside the station, the clerk finally stepped out. He looked at the gang scattered on the pavement, winded, humbled, silent. Then he looked at Kyle. You gonna post that? Kyle didn't answer. Not right away. He stared down at the screen, watched the clip replay, then hit upload. The truck's taillights disappeared into the dusk, swallowed by the long stretch of two-lane blacktop cutting through the desert like a scar. Silence held the station now, thick, heavy, not quite settled. The four men on the pavement made no move to stand. Mason sat hunched over, forearms braced against his knees, spit and blood dripping from his chin. Ricky groaned with each shallow breath, the skin around his ribs already darkening, but was silent, staring at nothing, hand cradling the side of his face where Michael's punch had landed. And Kyle just stood there, still holding his phone, though his arm had dropped to his side. His breathing was shaky, not from fear, not anymore, but from something worse. Clarity. The clerk walked toward him, stepping carefully over the spilled beer and broken pride. Hey, he said, voice thin. You okay? Kyle looked at him, but didn't answer. You get all that on video? The clerk asked. Kyle nodded. Yeah. The clerk scratched the back of his head, eyes drifting over the scene. I didn't do anything, he muttered, almost to himself. Kyle didn't look at him. Me neither. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The wind rustled through the broken slats of the old fence behind the lot. The busted neon sign buzzed once, then went dead completely. The clerk finally spoke. You know who that was? Kyle hesitated. No, but I think the internet will. Behind them, Mason let out a hoarse laugh, bitter and broken. He was nobody. Kyle turned toward him. You still believe that? Mason didn't answer. Kyle watched him for another second. Then he walked back to their truck, not to leave, but to grab his pack. He pulled out a first aid kit and came back to where Ricky lay. Here, he said, kneeling down. Hold still. Ricky flinched at the touch, but didn't argue. The clerk watched them, the gang, the silence, the dust curling in the wake of something they couldn't name. Then he looked up the road again, where the truck had vanished. He didn't know the man's name. Didn't need to. But the next time someone asked if he saw what happened, he'd say yes. He saw everything. The clerk stood at the edge of the lot long after the truck was gone, hands shoved in his apron pockets, shifting from foot to foot. He wasn't sure why he'd stepped outside. Maybe guilt. Maybe curiosity. Maybe because part of him hoped the man would come back and explain what the hell just happened. But Michael Tyson wasn't the kind of man who gave you neat explanations. Inside, the air conditioning buzzed too loud, drowning out the TV murmuring something about a storm on the coast. The clerk stepped back in, shut the door behind him, and flipped the lock not because he was scared, but because he didn't want any more surprises. Kyle came in a minute later. The phone was gone. So was the pack. He looked different, like something had broken open inside him. You the one who runs this place? He asked. The clerk shrugged. Just work here. My uncle owns it. Kyle nodded. You gonna report it? The clerk hesitated. You. Kyle paused, then shook his head. He didn't hurt us. Not really. Not the way he could have. There was silence again. The kind that fills up a room when truth's still echoing. He tried to stop it, Call said. Gave us a chance. I saw it. You saw it too. The clerk nodded, slowly. Yeah, I saw it. Then, after a long pause, he added, I should have done something. Call looked at him, then away. So should I. On the counter, the bell above the door jingled once in the wind, even though the door never moved. Call stepped out without another word. The clerk watched him go. Then he reached under the counter and pulled out the store's old receipt log. Flipped it open. Found the timestamp for the pump, Michael's. There was no name. No card trace. Just pump 2 prepay, $38.70. He stared at it for a long time, then reached for a pen. Next to the entry, in small, careful handwriting, he wrote. Didn't raise his voice. Didn't want to fight. Walked away quiet. And under it, as an afterthought. Strongest man I've ever seen. He didn't know why he wrote it. Maybe to remember. Maybe to confess. Maybe because one day, someone would ask what happened here. And he'd have something to show them. By dawn, the clip had already hit 1 million views. A 30-second phone video. Grainy. Shaky. No names, no commentary, just movement, sudden and surgical. The way the older man moved. The way he didn't flinch. The way he ended the fight in less than a minute without breaking a sweat. The title varied by the hour. Desert Gas Station Beatdown. Don't pick fights with strangers. OG teaches racist thugs a lesson. And finally, is this Mike Tyson? It didn't take long for people to put it together. The scar under the eye, the posture, the shape of his hands, the unmistakable pause before violence, like a man debating whether to open a vault that had stayed sealed for years. Confirmation came from an old boxing coach who commented under the video. That's him. I've seen that stance 1,000 times. That's Iron Mike. Older now, but still him. The internet exploded. News anchors speculated. Journalists scrambled for statements. Tyson's former manager issued a generic no comment. Publicists for a dozen brands scrambled to draft polite, opportunistic support. But Tyson? He was gone. Spotted once near Salt Lake City. Twice near the edge of a national park. A photo surfaced of a man feeding pigeons behind an abandoned barn. Could have been him. Might have been someone else. In Dusk Creek, the gas station's broken O was finally replaced. The owner painted the front awning. A tourist stopped in every few days asking if it was the place. The clerk just shrugged. Could be. Mason didn't talk to reporters. Neither did Ricky or Bo. Kyle posted once on his own account, 2 days after the video blew up. It was a black screen with white text. He told us to walk away. We didn't. Nothing more. The clip was eventually slowed down, analyzed, free-framed. People pointed out the exact moment Bo's legs buckled. The way Mason's swing was deflected like air. The way Tyson looked bored, not angry. One video editor captioned it. Hate makes you loud. Skill doesn't have to. And that quote stuck. A week later, in a different state, beneath a different sun, Michael Tyson pulled into another station. This one was cleaner. Brighter. The kind of place with automatic pumps and digital receipts and a "Have a nice day" scrolling across the LED sign above the door. No one paid him much attention. That was the beauty of age. People stopped looking closely. He stepped out of the truck, filled the tank, paid in cash. Inside, a father and his daughter stood near the snack aisle, arguing gently over gummy worms versus trail mix. The girl, maybe 10, with a wild cloud of curls, noticed him first. She stared. Michael caught her gaze. Smiled just a little. The soft, tired kind of smile that doesn't need teeth to feel full. She smiled back. A flash of pure joy. Not fear. Not awe. Just kindness. The father turned, nodded politely. Michael nodded back. No one asked who he was. No one needed to. When he stepped back into his truck, the world felt quieter again. He drove until the sky turned violet at the edges and the radio couldn't find a signal. He pulled off near an overlook, killed the engine, and stepped out. The wind carried the scent of pine and faraway rain. The road behind him was empty. Michael stood at the edge of the cliff, and looked out over the valley. There was no camera here, no viral moment, no gang, no crowd, just a man and his past, and the knowledge that this time he had chosen the right silence. He sat on a flat rock, stretched his legs, and breathed in deep, not like a fighter preparing for a bell, but like a man who had nothing left to prove. Behind him, the world buzzed on, reposting, reacting, debating. But out here, only the wind knew, and it said nothing.